Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for being here today. My name is Eva Paschalidou, and I'm from Greece. My background is in law and intellectual property and economics, and my latest endeavor was a master in environmental management and policy, and this is how this whole research came together in the first place. So I'm very excited to be here with all of you and discuss a bit around a super hot topic from what we have already heard at the conference on climate action and more specifically environmental sustainability in the practices of cultural heritage and looking specifically in digital preservation and ICT use. So yes, the topic of today's presentation is environmental sustainability in digital preservation of cultural heritage. And to be honest, I have imagined it more as a short info session, provoking a lively discussion right afterwards. So I don't really want to go too much into technical details here because it's a deeply interdisciplinary subject. So I'm not really touching upon the technicalities of ICT or the environmental economics behind the eco-sufficiency principle. But I just want us to get a broader, more holistic perspective of the three different elements making up the issue. So just to go through the agenda of today's quickly, first I would like to introduce the issue and give you an overview of the different core elements, that is cultural heritage, digital preservation, where we're using ICT, and climate change. This would lead us naturally to wonder what new action under this light we can take up, and I would attempt to share an understanding of eco-sufficiency and how this could be applied in digital preservation, and using a framework kind of I put together, elaborated from some other measures. And to make this a bit more tangible, I would like also to share some evidence and potentials from the Finnish case study, which was my focal case study for my past research. And of course, wrap up with some critical observations and conclusions, and go and continue the discussion together with a Q&A, which I hope it would be as long as the presentation, and would lead us to understand each other better and see how connected all of our different perspectives and approaches and experiences and backgrounds are really and need to be to take up this action with the challenges we're faced. So to introduce the issue, cultural heritage stands for all the tangible and intangible, movable, immovable, cultural and natural heritage that represents some intrinsic value for humanity and human experience, and that it needs to be safeguarded for future generations and for the public and communities to be represented. For this exact reason, the physical format of cultural heritage, in order to be protected by degradation, is transformed into a digital shape through a process of digital preservation taken up by cultural heritage organizations which have this this purpose of safeguarding cultural heritage, but also engaging public and making it accessible for the audiences. However, this process is heavily relied on information and communication technology, which, due to its high energy demands and raw materials used, It has a severe environmental impact, feeding back and let's say not creating in the first place, but contributing to the excessive how to say it, not just the climate change phenomena we are experiencing here, but on a global scale. So we can observe here a feedback loop being created where the end feeds back to the cause and vice versa. This is even more observable in the well-known example of Venice, where is only one of the 6% of UNESCO's cultural heritage sites that are expected to be flooded and affected by this way, by cultural heritage, by climate change in the next coming years. However, we cannot just focus on the actual natural or cultural heritage sites, but we also need to shift our focus to the to also, let's say, the more indirect impacts of climate change that is now at risk. And we're talking about artifacts, objects, but mainly about people's traditions and intangible cultural heritage, which is also being put at risk by essentially all the displaced communities expected to become climate refugees in the next coming years. And here is where we need to think of the processes used to safeguard this cultural heritage and the impact of the ICT infrastructure used in digital preservation. Digital preservation right now is taking up quickly and is being accelerated a lot by the need of remotely accessing cultural heritage, and as we said right before, of safeguarding it from climate risks. But what do we mean by ICT use in digital preservation? Exactly, we mean all this infrastructure network that is being used for safe storage, sharing, and providing access. And depending on our system's boundaries, we can include the extended network of the end users. And this is specifically software, but hardware as well, talking data centers, cables, satellites, laptops, and even servers, and of course, all the extended end users equipment. So taking up a life cycle environmental impacts approach, we can fully understand the whole scope of the environmental impacts of the ICT equipment that we discussed a bit in the morning sessions as well, but we need to see its phase or its stage separately if we can focus our attention, or just for breaking it down and making it more tangible and allow action to be taken up. So the production phase is one of the most, if not the most impactful one, since it's energy intensive. The mining and refining processes are really energy intensive, and we're talking mining and refining mainly of scarce minerals and metals like silver, lithium, tantalum, and of course plastics, fossil fuel based plastics used for the equipment. And usually for these extraction processes, chemicals are widely used. Going to the use phase, here our focus is mainly on the energy demands of the broader network and the end users, as we said, if we're including them in our analysis, and of course some maintenance costs. And finally, we have the end of life phase, which is way harmful end of life, if we consider that most of this equipment is ending up being landfilled or incinerated, with all the extended emissions that this entails. And we're not just talking CO2 emissions, but also toxic underground emissions. Since it's well known that e-waste, electronic waste, is mainly treated in the global south under super precarious conditions. And it's quite striking if we consider that only a 17.4% was recycled in 2020. So we can imagine the scale of e-waste being treated illegally, and what this means for the local communities. And of course, taking a step back and seeing the whole life cycle of the ICT equipment, we can better understand that every environmental impact being prevented, every bit really counts here. But yes, this also takes us to see and base our judgment of the action need to be taken on the latest climate change facts. And according to the latest IPCC report, if we continue on the track we are heading to and exceed 1.5 degrees of global warming, this will result in the end to trigger some processes and some feedback loops that would be irreversible. Still now, humanity has a small window of opportunity to act. However, in this broader picture, we definitely need to take into account the how to say it, one of the main facts and points came out of the latest report on April, that almost half of the world's population are highly vulnerable and are expected to be, not all of them among the first climate refugees, but to be affected in a major way. And we need, if we don't change our direction and exceed the 1.5 degrees, currently we are on 1.1 warming comparing to the pre-industrial levels, and we are heading quite fast to the 1.5 degrees of Celsius. And of course, it cannot be doubted that this is mainly due to anthropogenic carbon emissions. And if the global average temperature remains stable and the same, we are to expect a 15 to 30 centimeters of global average level sea rise by 2050. If we manage to stay within the Paris Agreement and the maximum of 2 degrees Celsius of warming, this will formulate around 50 centimeters. And if we continue with the current practices and business as usual, and let's say that is not the most optimistic, obviously, of the three ones, to get to have a 3 to 4 degrees of warming. This is the worst case scenario. And there we're looking at 70 centimeters of the sea level rise. And here it's quite important to understand that if we do trigger those thresholds, those tipping points, then we are falling into these feedback loops that some of them are quite hard, if not impossible to reverse. And a great and quite illustrating and striking example is the melting of the ice sheets that on its own will release vast amounts of CO2 in the atmosphere. So this is what we mean by this kind of negative feedback loops here being activated. And another point on top of these facts, the latest facts of IPCC, is that we have been crossing boundaries not only on climate change but on biodiversity loss, on ecosystems instability, on the way we have been producing and consuming resources. Currently, we are on a pace that exceeds the regenerative capacity of Earth's resources by 1.75 times. So we really need to start rethink our processes, our ideologies, worldviews, our current political and social and economic systems. And here is where a strong sustainability perspective could maybe inform this action. So I will attempt to introduce you to this understanding of a strong or deep sustainability, as it's called, that it accounts for the finite resources of Earth and the natural processes that are thought or considered as so unique and intricate ecosystem services like bees, pollination, that is so hard and impossible actually to replace by a human or man-made capital, because this is consisting the natural capital. So it advocates for the non-substitutability of natural capital by human-made capital, which is something that weak sustainability on the contrary does. So based on strong sustainability, an eco-sufficiency perspective actually advocates for reducing the use of resources to remain within these finite resources with biophysical boundaries, and approach this reduction by absolute numbers. So not just try to increase sufficient efficiencies in processes and come up with these technological fixes, since we are understanding that certain ecosystem services are not to be replaced by technological solutions. So eco-sufficiency is advocating for an absolute reduction of resources, and usually is conceptualized in contrast to eco-efficiency, that it stands for a reduction of resources per unit of work, meaning I can still access this Zoom meeting by using half the energy. This is me having increased the efficiency of the process. However, with eco-efficiency, we are running the risk of any resources savings not being saved and having prevented these environmental impacts or these resources from being used, but actually being put back into consuming and producing more. So if we were to give a definition for eco-sufficiency, this could be an inclusive one that would include eco-efficiency, as long as eco-efficiency was happening from eco-sufficiency. So we could be talking about the reduction of total resource use by emphasizing enough production, where enough refers to the sufficient fulfillment of human needs. And this fulfillment can, of course, be done in an efficient way, but it also needs to be sufficient from within this context. And to bring it to the ICT discussion, this would mean to reduce the resources, the matter and the energy used in ICT processes by doing just enough digital preservation for the sufficient fulfillment of the cultural heritage organization's purposes. Okay, this is a tricky part because this means that we need to reevaluate what we mean by enough digital preservation, and again face these tough questions of what am I saving, what am I choosing to preserve or not, how future generations will relate to this material. Are communities equally represented if I am saying that I want to preserve less? So these are mostly ethical considerations that we can discuss later in the Q&A if you'd like, but I won't go more in detail here. So I would just like to share some practical experiences. But first, I will introduce how this concept of eco-sufficiency can translate into measures for digital preservation and the framework I put together for that. It's based on the Environmental Sustainable Digital Preservation Framework by Keith Pendergrass. By the time I conducted the research, it was the only set of measures available. So I elaborated the measures into this strong sustainability framework, where on the horizontal axis, we can see the different stages of sustainability, appraisal, preservation, and accessibility used for categorizing the different measures. And on the vertical axis, again, we can see this construction of the different strategies, starting from sufficiency to digital preservation efficiency, which I will go into detail in a bit, and efficiency strategies. And these, the way they are manifesting is based on the hierarchy for a sufficiency approach, where a sufficiency strategy is advocating for total reductions in digital preservation, but it's still an inclusive understanding that does incorporate digital preservation efficiency with volume reductions, volume meaning data volume, and efficiency, which is the mainstream understanding of improving technical efficiencies. However, since we all understand that there's no way that cultural heritage material will suddenly stop being produced, or we will not need to preserve cultural heritage assets anymore, we cannot really, we need to find a way to adapt this conceptualization for the field of cultural heritage. And this is why we are talking of introducing a qualitative function that advocates for lowering the preservation quality enough, while at the same time we're trying to maximize the value of use quality that the audience and the end user engaged with the material is taking out of this interaction. And actually this qualitative function can be understood in digital preservation efficiency by giving you this example. We are having here two identical images. One is a JPEG and the other one is a TIFF one. However, I can still understand and read. If I'm zooming in, I can still understand and read this sequence of numbers. Even though the one is a 6 times lighter file of less quality, the JPEG one, using way more less energy to be stored and saved, while the other one is a high resolution image. So, I mean, of course, depending from the goal or the aim of the use of the image, we can achieve this balance of lowering the quality enough, but still taking the highest possible information, but also value out of our usage of the material. So yes, going to the evidence and the potentials. From the Finnish Heritage study case, I documented, according to this framework, the practice from the Archives and Information Services Department and their surrounding ecosystem. I don't want to go into much detail. I don't want really to look for you to look into the framework. I just want you to get the overview idea that we see most of the measures being applied, some of them being restricted from application, while some other measures were actually considered to be applied. So we could speak of all three digital sufficiency component strategies were partially manifesting. However, what I noticed is that for the sufficiency, the qualitative function, how we are following up this value of engagement with material is not really there, it's not introduced yet. That for the digital preservation efficiency is something that is only discussed internally within the department. So there's not much that can be done to extend any such measures or action upwards to their external partners, while efficiency is being perceived as the mainstream sustainability strategy. However, still the decision-making on quality is only within the cultural heritage organization and their partners, and the public or the audiences are not being actively involved in that with feedback tools. And there was a discrepancy on their understanding of what sustainability meant and their actual practices around sustainability. So actions that thought to be pushing or pro-sustainability, they were not, how to say it, they were not really aligned with what we mean by strong sustainability. And it was the second quite interesting element, of course, it was the draw of a mapping of the network, both of actors and initiatives in the cultural heritage ecosystem around the Finnish Heritage Agency, where, again, please don't go into detail into taking out the actors. However, I want to point out that all the incentivizing factors for the uptake of sufficiency were fundamentally aligned with the existential purpose of the cultural heritage organizations. However, still the qualitative function of value needs to be introduced along all the actors. And we need to see a bottom-up engagement of the public, because still all the strategies were just cascading from upwards from the government to the ministries to the organizations, and we weren't really noticing any feedback from the public. However, FINA was identified as the main hub for organizing all the 450 organizations of the Finnish network, and as an amazing dissemination opportunity of these understandings around sustainability, of organizing their actions, and actually of using tools that FINA has already in place. So yes, overarching potentials are the highly interconnected network and the inclusive organizational structures. And oops, I'm sorry for that. So yes, just some critical observations and conclusions. First, we need to make the links between the ICT research, the sustainability policies being put in place, and the strategies by cultural heritage organizations themselves, and not siloing our approaches, but actually seeing what is happening out there and combining forces. We need to create an understanding around sustainability, both internally in the organizations and externally to our public. We need to enlarge a user-centric approach from the organizations with feedback tools and taking into consideration community needs in regards to representation. And finally, for the established network, we need to see horizontally and cross-sectoral approaches to the use of ICT in a more sustainable way. And we need to have way more public inclusive understanding of the network as cultural heritage organizations if we want to see meaningful change that is actually answering to the urgent climate crisis. So thank you for your attention. I'm super sorry for running a bit over the time I had scheduled in my mind, because I want to have a way longer conversation. But yes, please, I'm looking forward to any questions or points or opinions or thoughts or whatever you'd like to share.
Thanks, Eva. So
Thank
I'm
you.
sitting next to Eva, actually. I'm
Okay.
just going to come in a little bit. I thought that was really interesting. So, I mean, hopefully we'll have some questions here. Let's have a look. But I wondered if I could abuse my position as your, moderator today and ask the first question, if that's
Yes,
all right.
please.
So at Europeana, we have a publishing framework, and part of the publishing framework is about quality. And part of this definition of quality is about like the size of images. So we're asking, that providers give us the highest possible quality so that those images can then be reused. So there's this connection between quality and reuse. But what do we do now if we find out that, this is actually causing an environmental impact, which is negative? I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. Because actually this is kind of addressed in the framework of measures that, according to each organization's risk mitigation strategy or policy, and that includes how we want our material to be reusable, or to what extent we want our material to be reusable in the future, we can decide how much we can afford to lower this quality. Or if we can just save one super high resolution, high quality format that it's not though readily accessible. So it doesn't mean that it's always on for everyone to use, and it can be accessed on demand, for instance. So on the framework, we are talking a lot about tiering efforts, according to the value of the material and according to the use we observe that is being, according to how much is used from the audience. How much interest there is for this material to be rescued and preserved.
And speaking to audiences to see what people want to use, rather than just taking the next book from the shelf, which is an approach that sometimes happens. I don't know, do we have questions from the audience? You can put your hand up or you can post them in the chat. So I think we have one question.
Randy?
Yeah, hi. I found a room here that was empty so I could speak. Thank you so much for that. There were two sort of concepts that you talked about at the end that I thought it would be nice if you could go more into, which is the user-centric approach and horizontal cross-sectional approaches. So how can we imagine what that actually looks like in practice, and how to encourage that, and how that would affect these topics?
That actually goes a bit back to what Fiona just asked on actually asking or taking into consideration what the users, the end users and the public wants to be rescued and saved, and in what formats are they actually using. Are they interested in these super high resolution images, or is something that they can only access in case, I don't know, of a researcher who wants to do some, I don't know, photogrammetry research or projects or whatever. So this is what I mean by user-centric, essentially taking the needs of the user and of the public in the middle of the decision-making of the cultural heritage organizations processes in regards to digital preservation, of course. I'm not going too far into organizational things of the organizations. And according to the second part of your question on cross-sectoral or horizontal strategies, what struck me in the Finnish case was that we had the Information and Telecommunications Ministry, the Education and Cultural Heritage Ministry, and the Environment Ministry, all approaching similar problems and issues around the use of ICT, but separately, without really addressing the issue of ICT's sustainability, because until now it was only discussed as, oh, this amazing digitalization solution that will help us combat climate change at a glance. But actually, Finland is the first country introducing a strategy on the negative environmental impacts of ICT and what steps can be taken to mitigate that. So the timing was perfect. That strategy had just came up, so I thought it would be amazing if I would also making this recommendation of cross-sectoral and horizontal integration of this strategy, also from the cultural heritage organization's perspective. Yeah, I don't know if it answers your, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a really provocative question from Dan in the chat, which I quite like, which is, should we digitize at all?
This would be the dream, to just experience culture, I would say, if I were to be asked, but at the same time, I cannot say how grateful I am for all those organizations and professionals who have saved amazing cultural heritage from millennia back for me to have experienced and be in this privileged position now to judge and be like, no, we should not digitize, or we should not digitize in this quality. But I mean, I am a person of today's world, and I'm rather concerned about the whole planet's continuity and whether there would be any future generations for me, as I did enjoy all these artifacts saved through digitalization for, you know, for the future digital cultural heritage to be savored and cherished by all the future generations. So I would say that we need a balance. Yes, we do need to save through digitization, since this is the best solution we have right now. Apart from, I don't know, DNA data storage, which is still an inaccessible technology and in progress. But for now, this is what we have. I'm pro of a balance. I want balanced and sufficient digitalization, which is hard. I'm not saying that there are all the answers there, but at least we need to start discussing around it, because until now it has been a huge taboo issue in the cultural heritage sector, that, oh, we need to save everything as much as we can in the best quality we can. But I think that we are faced with much greater challenges. So everything is kind of, you know, reimagined through this spectrum.
I think Dan would like to respond to you. Go ahead, Dan.
Yes, I totally agree. So it wasn't really that it's like, no, we shouldn't digitize everything. But some of the times that I'm looking at archives, I find things I think, but really, seriously, this is a beer mat, guys. And you're thinking, okay, so for somebody who's a beer mat aficionado, this is great, but in the greater scheme of things, this also means that we destroy ourselves, so that in the future there's a nice archive where there are no human beings who can look at things. Then I think I totally agree that it is a question of balance. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the point. Actually, yeah, that essentially that's the essence of my whole problematization here. That yes, who chooses what to digitize or what not, and this is why I'm so much believing in the public being placed in the center of decision making and democratize this way how we are saving cultural heritage and for whom. Again, I don't want to, yeah, I don't know. Yes, I would prefer to think culture as the catalyst for, you know, leading our way forward to a humanly livable planet. So yes, I think that this can be achieved by putting people in the middle, in the focus.
Oh, brilliant. We also got a question in the chat from Pascalia. Sorry, I hope I'm not saying her name wrongly. So this question regards 3D technologies and can 3D printing contribute to the sustainable management of heritage? Is that something that you've considered?
Actually, great point, and thank you for the question, because it was something I wanted to touch upon. I will do so in just 1 minute, super quickly. Just to give you a really quick understanding of the 3D's impact, and I mean 3D representation here, which is needed for the printing that you are mentioning in your question. It's almost 500 times heavier than a high resolution image, because in average, this is how many we need in order to come up with a 3D representation of an object. So again, of course, it depends from the object. If we're discussing, like, I don't know, the Pisa Tower, the numbers are completely different. I'm just discussing digitizing an average, modest, I don't know, amphorea. So again, the question of the balance, if it's something necessarily absolutely necessarily to be saved, I would say so. It could hold great communication and educational value, the 3D representation and the 3D printing of models. However, yeah, we're talking about huge numbers of environmental impacts that are lying into the 3D imaging. Sorry, I'm 1 minute over.
No, I think we have do we have a bit longer? Sarah, tell me, when do we finish? Do you know? Oh, we can't hear you. Hold on, let me check. I think we have a little bit longer.
It could be 2:15.
Let me have a look. Yeah, we have 15. We have 15 minutes actually.
Okay, cool.
So we can keep chatting. I mean, I have more questions, but let's see if anyone else has a question. Pascalia says that's great, thanks. Well, maybe I could just ask one more question if that's all right. So yeah, we're talking about the 3D printing. This 3D is something that I'm kind of interested in, because you know, if you 3D scan everything, if you have these amazing models, then you have so much more information about objects and about archaeological sites or other kinds of heritage sites. So if things are lost, and of course we can't predict the future, we don't know which objects or sites might be completely lost to us. But if we have the 3D models, then we can fully reconstruct them. So it's like almost like that more information comes at more of an environmental cost. So, I mean, maybe that's more of a statement, but I mean, yes,
no,
I
super
really,
valid.
you know, we want to 3D digitize the world, but what is the cost of that going to be? Are we actually, in a way, like destroying it in the process? You know, it's
Actually, this
it's
is
a big question.
this is a super interesting question that I was even considering in the context of my future research. Let's say from a philosophical approach, how technological our way of us humans existing we want to be. Are we talking about our technological way of being, of existing in the world? How much are we connected or experiencing life through technology? Or in contrast to that, of course, it stands an technological way of being, one more into, you know, closer connection with nature, with community, with, I don't know, a kind of a human experience away from this mode of having, I mean, in the sense of me defining my existence through having or through technology, but rather through existing through human relationships and experiences. I don't know, I would say without this, you know, like filter of technology through everything we do.
Yeah.
Because you did mention that there is way more knowledge lying in there. And of course, we could kind of digitally transform our whole world. And this is where we're heading, actually. But who is deciding whether everyone on the globe wants to transit to this purely digital metaverse where everything will be connected and linked digitally? I mean, every single human experience. So I don't want to sound dystopic. But no, I mean, I always love, you know, discussing some extreme versions for me to more easily understand the lower levels of the discussion. So yeah, for me, this is kind of the dichotomy here of how much digitalization, how much technology, again, is we are coming down to the very needs of humans. What am I defining as a need, and how am I choosing to fulfill this need? How much is enough for me? And so this is, I don't know, this is a concept on which eco-sufficiency is based, or strong sustainability.
And we really imagine a world where things are more digital in the future, but maybe they don't have to be. So it's a choice, maybe.
It's definitely
now's the time to make these decisions.
Exactly.
And we have a few comments in the chat. So Dan mentions the metaverse, you know, which also relates to questions of control, who has access, who and what are the gatekeepers of that.
We have discussed around it a lot in connection to the new data space and why it was, you know, a decision needed to be made in the first place for having, you know, not some few corporations you know, managing knowledge and digital cultural heritage assets. And this is why I do insist. I feel like public is the answer. Public who experience and they are in connection with their culture is the answer for my perspective.
That's fantastic. I mean, does anyone in the room have a question? Please just put your hand up if you have a question in the room, or you want to say something, or just speak. Anyone? No, I think we blew everyone's mind, maybe, with all that. Talk about the
I'm
metaverse
super
in the
sorry if I
future.
fried your minds.
These are the only conversations I like. What can I say? So, sorry.
The point is that I just super briefly try to touch upon concepts that all of them on their own, they could be separate, you know, like sessions, presentations, papers. I mean, I wrote a whole 90 pages thesis on the topic. Oh yes, Randy.
Yeah, Randy's got in there quickly with the last question. So, or maybe not the last, but can you talk about the life cycle of technology and how people can evaluate that?
You mean in regards to environmental impacts, the life cycle on the environmental impacts? Okay. Do you want me to go back to the slide? Okay, just.
And yeah, it seems like this is something we haven't been talking about that much, about, you know, the actual physicality of the technology and the waste. And I know I've seen a film about looking at the waste, you know, getting dumped, and it's pretty shocking.
Actually, I think kind of is being discussed, not, I would say, from what I researched, not too painstakingly or in detail in the cultural heritage field, because we don't really understand the materiality behind all these digital assets. As you said, it's super hard to conceptualize that me being here on this desk, accessing the meeting through my computer, is actually me using, I don't know, like the internet cabling all around the city of Hague, or, you know, a data center, I don't know, close to Wageningen, or, I mean, it's really, really hard to grasp a dispersed network of equipment. And actually, when it's hard on its own to understand what equipment is even doing, I mean, it took me some time to understand how data centers are organized and how we are saving things there. It's not made for people to understand and grasp easily, because it's a really complex process on its own. And here, I mean, with complexity comes the difficulty in accessing more holistic approach. So this is why I feel, or I have studied, or my literature research showed that a life cycle perspective is the safest way. If we want really to understand what's the impact, it's really easy to go and focus just, okay, what am I using now? I'm just using a laptop, which I used for the past 3 years of my life, so it's fine, the impact is minimum, and some electricity, and some Wi-Fi, which is probably again electricity, so it's nothing, which is not nothing at all. We have even started discussing sufficiency in energy consumption, and we will in the coming winter. So taking a life cycle approach and looking into production, use phase, end of life, and believe me, I've left totally outside the distribution network, the packaging network, all these. I mean, there are so many different assumptions that you need to take into consideration for conducting a life cycle assessment in the first place, and understand all the different environmental impacts and where they are lying in the processes, and how far am I even choosing to go? Am I making the assumption, or maybe am I including in my systems analysis the end users or not, because this is a whole different pack of emissions or environmental impact. So it's quite complex on its own. Is a great point for me to start from. Even just for, you know, awareness raising purposes or educational purposes. Just so a super simple circle with, okay, look what is happening in all these different phases, you know? But we can discuss into it more in detail, Randy, if you like.
Thanks a lot, Randy. So maybe we can take one last question. We have one from Mia. The question was about, I have another one too. Do you have any suggestions on how to approach the concept of green coding for software?
To be honest, I did touch upon it a bit from a policy and legislation perspective in my research. Because, okay, let's say that now we are again on a policy legislation level, we're mainly addressing hardware with efficiency and with I don't know, sustainability assessment directives, and most lately with green procurement directives, which are not even obligatory or mandatory to conduct. But for the software, it's something that is only now, I think, is starting being discussed. I think it was just a paper on 2022 discussing a communication around that on the Commission's level. And okay, again, the most straightforward way to, it's not green coding, but it does touch upon the democratization or the open accessibility of software, right? With open access software. So I mean, not creating a software from the scratch, but use something that is already out there, so that you're making sure, you know, that you're not running the risk of any unpredicted barriers being put there, right? And
yeah, Niels also made a comment, and he also asked about crowdsourced storage solutions, and if that's something that could help.
The hardest part might be predicting the future users want to use. Maybe it is what seems the most.
Yeah. So who decides? And I mean, I think this is something for the data space we're going to be having to think about.
Definitely.
So we've reached our time now. So maybe you could just make one last reflection, and then we can close the meeting.
I would try super quickly to take on this last question. I happened to discuss how Flickr on this 100 years planning workshop, how Flickr can be rescued and exist in the next 100 years. And the end reflection of mine after the workshop was that we need peer-to-peer, we need peer production, and we need the public base to support whatever happens on the services level, right? Because anyhow, it's inevitable to have this constant interaction and circle between public services and, of course, all the infrastructure in between, because services are made for people are using the services. It's a really well-established relationship there, and only by having this perspective of people holding means of, or being in the middle of using and having a saying in the production and yeah, and the accessing, most importantly, I think, yeah, is a key, and it can provide super how to say it, oh, this word is just giving my mind, creative and relatable solutions. So yes, I could finish with that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. So yeah, everyone, thanks for joining us today. I hope you found that really interesting. And yeah, I'm sure it's not the last word that you've heard on the subject.
Oh, I hope there will be much more discussion around it in the
Yeah.
future. But thank you so much, everyone, for participating.
Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.